It was a bright afternoon, the kind where the sunlight bounced off every shiny surface in the city. Cars glistened on the lot of a well-known dealership that sat proudly near the main road. The glass windows reflected the busy street outside, and inside, salesmen in neat shirts stood ready to greet customers with warm smiles that sometimes faded as quickly as they appeared. The dealership was known for its luxury cars. Polished metal, the smell of fresh leather and soft music playing in the background made it feel almost like a showroom of dreams. People walked in hoping to find their perfect car, while others just liked to look around. The manager, a man who had been there for years, stood behind his desk keeping a close eye on everything. He liked things in order. No noise, no unnecessary people wandering around, and definitely no one who didn't look like a buyer. Just as he was finishing a call, the glass door opened with a gentle chime. A man walked in, calm and quiet. He wore a simple but clean outfit, the kind that didn't scream wealth but carried quiet confidence. His expression was peaceful, yet his eyes scanned the place carefully as if taking everything in. He paused by the first car, running his hand lightly across its hood, not in a careless way but like someone who appreciated good work. No one went up to greet him. A few of the salesmen looked at each other but didn't move. One even whispered, "He doesn't look like he's buying today." The manager noticed the man too. He frowned slightly, watching as the visitor moved closer to the more expensive models. After a few moments, the manager sighed, adjusted his tie, and walked over. His tone was polite, but the politeness felt forced. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, standing just close enough to make his authority clear. The man smiled lightly and said, "Just looking around. I wanted to see how things are running here." The manager blinked. "Running," he repeated. "Are you with one of the customers?" The man shook his head. "No, not exactly. I just wanted to take a look." The manager didn't like vague answers. He crossed his arms and gave a tight smile. "Well, sir, this area is for customers and authorized staff only. If you're not here to buy, I'll have to ask you to leave." The man didn't look offended. He simply looked around again and nodded. "I understand. I'll be on my way." He turned and walked toward the door, his steps calm, his posture steady. Before leaving, he glanced back once more, his expression unreadable, and then he stepped out into the sunlight. Inside, the manager exhaled sharply, muttering something about people wasting time. The salesman laughed quietly, and the moment passed like it never happened. But one of the newer employees, a young salesman named Daniel, frowned. "Sir," he said hesitantly. He seemed pretty calm. "What if he was someone from corporate or something?" The manager scoffed. "Corporate doesn't send anyone without notice. Trust me, I'd know." He brushed off the thought and went back to his paperwork, confident he had handled it well. Outside, the man walked to his car parked across the street. It wasn't flashy, but it was clean and well kept. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment, watching the dealership through the windshield. His eyes didn't show anger, just quiet thoughtfulness. After a long minute, he pulled out his phone and made a short call. "Yes," he said in a calm voice. "I stopped by. I saw what I needed to see." Then he ended the call and drove away. Back inside, the rest of the day went on as usual. Customers came and went. Deals were made. The manager joked with his staff and told them they were doing great numbers. But as the sun started to dip below the buildings, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something about that man's visit wasn't ordinary. That night, the dealership closed late. The staff locked the glass doors and turned off the lights one by one. The manager stood by his office window, staring at the rows of cars outside under the lot lights. He was proud of how far he'd come. He started as a salesman, worked his way up, and now managed one of the busiest dealerships in the area. He liked control. He liked knowing everything that happened in his space, but he also had a habit of judging too quickly. He believed he could read people from the way they dressed, the way they walked, the tone of their voice. And in his mind, he had already decided that the man from earlier didn't belong in that dealership. The next morning, the air felt different. The employees arrived early, straightening ties, fixing collars, and making sure the showroom looked spotless. They had received an email the previous night from the regional office saying someone important would be visiting. The manager assumed it was one of the directors. He was excited but nervous too. He wanted everything perfect. "Let's make sure everyone's on point today," he told the team. No mistakes, no slow responses. And smile, remember image matters. By 10 o'clock, the dealership looked flawless. Cars were perfectly aligned, brochures were stacked neatly, and the smell of new leather filled the air. Then as the clock ticked past 10:30, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The manager straightened his jacket and walked toward the door with a confident smile. The SUV door opened and out stepped the same man who had been told to leave the day before. Behind him came a woman in a business suit carrying a folder. The manager froze. His smile faltered, then quickly returned, though his face showed confusion. The man walked in calmly the same way he had before, but this time the energy in the room shifted. The staff who recognized him stood silently, unsure of what to do. The woman beside him introduced herself politely and said she was from corporate headquarters. The manager blinked, trying to process what was happening. "Oh, yes, of course. Good morning," he said quickly. "Welcome to our dealership. How can I assist you today?" The woman smiled. "We're here to meet the team. And," she said, turning toward the man beside her, "to introduce your new owner." The words seemed to echo in the room. For a moment, no one moved. The manager's eyes widened as he looked at the man standing before him, the same person he had ordered out just yesterday. The man gave a calm, polite nod. "Good morning," he said softly. "Nice to see everyone again." The manager stammered. You were here yesterday." "Yes," the man replied, his tone kind but firm. "I wanted to see how things run before I made it official." The staff stood frozen, unsure what to say. Some exchanged shocked glances. Daniel looked down, hiding a small, knowing smile. The manager swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." The new owner raised his hand slightly, stopping him. "You didn't have to know," he said quietly. "You just had to treat me the same way you'd treat anyone else who walked in here." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the faint music playing in the background couldn't soften the tension. The manager felt his throat tighten. He wanted to explain, to say it was a misunderstanding, but deep down he knew it wasn't. He had judged the man based on nothing but appearance. The corporate representative continued speaking, outlining how ownership had changed and how new policies would soon take effect. But the manager barely heard her words. All he could think about was the moment yesterday when he had told this man to leave, when he had assumed who he was based on what he saw. When the meeting ended, the new owner walked through the showroom again just like before, only this time everyone followed him respectfully. He stopped by the same car he had touched the day before and smiled faintly. "Nice model," he said quietly. "Still my favorite." As he turned to leave, his eyes met the manager's. "I believe in giving everyone a fair chance," he said softly. "I hope you'll do the same." The manager nodded, his face pale, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir, absolutely." The man smiled slightly and walked out, leaving behind a silence so deep that even the hum of the air conditioning felt loud. When the door closed, everyone in the room exhaled at once. The manager stood still for a moment, then walked slowly back to his office. He sat down, staring at his desk, the reality settling in. He had spent years working to climb the ladder, believing he knew how to read people, believing that he understood success. But now in a single moment he realized how wrong he'd been. Outside, the new owner got into his SUV and looked back at the dealership once more. He didn't feel anger or satisfaction, just quiet reflection. He had seen enough to understand the kind of culture that had been growing inside that place, and he knew exactly what he would change. Inside, the staff whispered among themselves, still shocked. Some couldn't help but feel embarrassed, others relieved. Daniel finally spoke up, breaking the tension. "He seemed like a good man," he said quietly. "I think things might actually get better." The others nodded slowly. The manager stayed in his office long after everyone went back to work. He didn't touch his paperwork or check his sales numbers. He just sat there, replaying the moment when he had told that man to leave. The words echoed in his mind. "This area is for customers and staff only." Now he realized that man wasn't just a customer or staff. He was the person who owned everything around him. The rest of the day went on quietly. No one spoke much, and the usual laughter and chatter were gone. The dealership, once full of pride, now felt humbled. As the sun began to set, the manager finally stood and walked out of his office. He looked around the showroom one last time before locking up. The cars gleamed under the soft light, reflecting his tired face. He whispered to himself, "You never know who's watching." Then he turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped outside into the evening air, his mind heavy but changed. And somewhere down the road, the new owner drove home in silence, already planning how to build something better, something fairer. Not just for customers, but for everyone inside that dealership. He knew tomorrow would be a new beginning. The next morning, the dealership was buzzing with energy, but not the kind anyone enjoyed. Everyone moved a little too carefully, spoke a little too softly, and kept glancing at the glass doors as if the new owner might appear at any moment. The tension was thick enough to feel in the air. The manager, who had spent the night thinking about everything that had happened, looked exhausted. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that calm face staring back at him, the same face he'd told to leave the dealership. He arrived earlier than usual, hoping to get things in order before the others came in. The sun had barely risen when he unlocked the main doors. The morning light flooded through the glass, falling across the spotless cars like gold. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at his reflection in the shiny surface of a silver sedan. He hardly recognized himself. The proud, confident manager from yesterday felt like a different person now. He walked slowly through the rows of cars, running a hand across the hoods the way the new owner had done. It felt strange now. He realized that he had never really looked at these cars the way a customer did. He had looked at them as numbers, as sales, as targets. But yesterday's moment had shaken something loose inside him. By the time the rest of the staff started coming in, the manager was already in his office, pretending to work. He didn't want to talk about what had happened, but he knew he couldn't avoid it forever. The whispers started as soon as the first employee arrived. Everyone had their own version of the story. One person said the new owner was testing them. Another said he had been watching the dealership for weeks. Someone else claimed he was planning to replace half the staff. None of them really knew. When the clock struck 9, the dealership doors opened again. This time, no one missed a beat. Every head turned. The new owner walked in, dressed simply again, his steps calm and steady. But his presence changed the entire room. There was no arrogance in his walk, no show of power. Yet everyone knew this man held all the authority now. He smiled politely at the receptionist and greeted a few staff members as he walked through the showroom. His tone was kind, but his eyes were observant, catching every detail, the nervous movements, the forced smiles, the way the manager stood behind his desk trying to look busy. The manager straightened his tie and came forward quickly, his voice careful and respectful. "Good morning, sir," he said. "It's good to see you again." The owner returned a small smile. "Good morning," he replied. "I wanted to meet the team properly today." The manager nodded. "Of course. Everyone's ready." The owner looked around the room, his calm expression making everyone more anxious. Then he said softly, "Let's start with something simple. I'd like to talk to everyone together." Within minutes, the staff gathered in the main showroom. Some stood near the cars, others by the desks. The manager stood near the front, hands folded tightly. The owner waited until everyone was quiet. "I know yesterday's visit was unexpected," he began. His voice was even and smooth with no anger in it. But there was a quiet authority that made people listen. "I wanted to see how things were here before stepping in fully. It's important for me to understand the people who make this place run." He paused for a moment, looking around. No one moved. "I noticed a lot of good things," he continued. "The showroom is well kept, the staff are organized, and customers are being served. But I also noticed something else, something we'll need to work on." The room was silent. Everyone waited. He didn't raise his voice, but his words carried weight. "I saw how some people make assumptions, how some of us decide who matters and who doesn't, just by looking. I've seen that before in many places, and I know how much it costs a business. Not in money, but in trust." The manager lowered his head slightly. He knew those words were meant for him. The owner's tone softened. "I don't believe in embarrassing anyone," he said. "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we move forward. Starting today, things will be different here." He looked toward the team. "I'll be spending time here for the next few weeks. I want to learn from you, and I want you to learn from me. We're going to rebuild the way we treat people, customers and staff alike." A few people nodded nervously. No one spoke. Then the owner smiled lightly. "Now let's get back to work. We'll talk more later, The meeting ended, but no one forgot what he said. As the staff went back to their stations, a quiet energy filled the room. Not fear, but awareness. They all knew the dealership was about to change. Later that morning, the owner met with the manager privately in his office. The air between them felt heavy. The manager tried to speak first. "Sir, I truly apologize for what happened yesterday. I didn't mean to offend you in any way." The owner sat down across from him and leaned back slightly. "I know you didn't," he said gently. "But that's the problem. You didn't even stop to think about it. You didn't see me as someone worth speaking to. And that's something we have to fix." The manager's voice cracked a little. "I've been doing this for years. I thought I understood people. I thought I could tell who was serious and who wasn't." The owner looked at him quietly. "And now?" The manager sighed. "Now I realize I don't know as much as I thought." The owner nodded. "That's a good place to start. Real learning begins when you stop assuming." There was no anger in his tone, only calm honesty. The manager felt both ashamed and grateful. The owner continued, "I don't plan to fire anyone. I believe in giving people a chance to grow. But I do expect change, not just from you, from everyone here. Respect isn't optional." The manager nodded quickly. "I understand. You have my word." The owner smiled faintly. "Good. Then let's make this place something we can both be proud of." For the rest of that day, the owner walked through every section of the dealership, the service area, the garage, the reception, and even the small break room at the back. He greeted every employee he met, asking their names, how long they'd been there, and what they liked or didn't like about their job. Most people were shy at first, unsure how to talk to him, but he had a way of making them comfortable. His calm tone and warm smile broke down barriers. By the afternoon, people were talking freely. He listened more than he spoke. He asked about the challenges they faced, the customers who were hard to please, and the little things that slowed their work. Every person he spoke to realized he wasn't just another boss. He was someone who wanted to understand. At one point, he joined the service team in the garage. The mechanics were surprised to see the new owner walking among oil-stained floors, but he didn't mind getting his shoes dirty. He asked them about their tools, their schedules, and how management treated them. They told him honestly. When he left the garage, he had a small smile. He could already see where the problems were, not in skill or effort, but in attitude. Too many people were afraid to speak up, afraid to make mistakes. Meanwhile, the manager watched everything from his office window. Every time the owner stopped to talk to someone, the manager felt a mix of relief and guilt. He realized how distant he had been from his own team. He had been running the place like a machine, but this man, this quiet, composed owner, was running it like a family. By the end of the day, things felt different. People weren't just talking about sales anymore. They were talking about how the owner made them feel heard. Some of the older employees said they hadn't felt that kind of respect in years. That evening, as the staff began closing up, the owner called everyone together again. This time, his tone was lighter. "Thank you all for today," he said. "I know it's been unusual having me around, but I want you to get used to it. I believe in working side by side, not above." He looked at them with a kind smile. "We'll make mistakes. We'll learn, but we'll do it together. The only thing I'll never accept here is disrespect for anyone." Everyone nodded. The words weren't loud or dramatic, but they stayed with them. After the meeting, the manager approached the owner again. "Sir, I wanted to thank you for giving me a chance," he said quietly. "You could have replaced me and I wouldn't have blamed you." The owner looked at him with thoughtful eyes. "I'm not interested in replacing people. I'm interested in changing hearts. That takes patience." The manager lowered his head. "I'll do better." "I know you will," the owner said simply. As the day ended and the last lights were turned off, the owner stood by the glass door looking out at the parking lot. He could see the reflection of the dealership behind him, the same place where he had been turned away just a day earlier. But now it was his. He didn't feel pride in owning it. He felt purpose. There was work to do, not just in selling cars, but in rebuilding trust. Outside, the sky turned deep orange as the sun began to set. The cars glowed softly in the fading light. He smiled faintly, thinking of the future. He knew that changing people's minds would take time, but he also knew something powerful. When respect enters a place, everything changes. The way people talk, the way they move, the way they look at each other. It all shifts, and he was ready to make that shift happen, one day at a time. That night, when the staff finally went home, they all carried something different in their hearts. The fear they'd felt that morning had turned into quiet hope. Maybe things really would be different now. Maybe this new owner would lead in a way they had never seen before. And for the manager, as he locked his office and stepped into the cool night air, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: humility. He realized leadership wasn't about power. It was about people, about listening, understanding, and treating everyone with dignity. He looked back at the darkened showroom one last time before getting into his car. He whispered softly to himself, "Tomorrow will be better." Across town, the new owner sat in his living room, a cup of tea in his hand. His phone buzzed with a message from corporate headquarters asking how the first day went. He didn't type much, just one line. "It's going to take time, but it's worth it." He put the phone down and leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He wasn't thinking about profits or sales numbers. He was thinking about people, the faces he'd seen today, the stories they carried, and the lessons they were all still learning. He smiled quietly to himself. Change had begun. The following week brought quiet changes to the dealership, though no one could quite put a finger on how. Nothing huge had happened yet, no major announcements, no dramatic shifts, but the air felt different. The new owner had a presence that didn't need loud words. When he was around, people listened, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The staff had started greeting customers with genuine smiles instead of the forced ones they wore before. Even the receptionist, who used to glance up only briefly, now stood straight and said hello to everyone who walked through the door. It was as if the whole place had taken a deep breath and decided to start fresh. The manager noticed it too. For the first time in years, he wasn't walking around with the same tightness in his chest. He still felt guilt over what he had done, but the owner's calm forgiveness gave him space to think. Each morning, when he looked at the cars gleaming under the lights, he reminded himself not to repeat the same mistake, not to judge too quickly, not to assume. The owner visited the dealership almost every day that week. He didn't sit in an office or hide behind reports. He walked around, spoke with everyone, asked questions that made people think. He wanted to know how they treated customers, how they handled complaints, and how they felt about their work. Some employees were shy at first, afraid of saying the wrong thing, but he made it clear there was no punishment for honesty. One morning, he joined the sales team as they greeted a new customer, an elderly man who came in wearing a worn-out jacket and shoes that had seen better days. Before, someone like him might have been ignored or treated with impatience. But now, the team looked at each other, remembering what they'd learned. The owner stood back quietly watching. The manager himself approached the old man and smiled. "Good morning, sir. What brings you in today?" The man looked surprised at being treated so kindly. "Just looking, son," he said softly. "My old car's giving me trouble. I don't know if I can afford anything new, though." The manager nodded. "No rush. Let's just take a look together. Maybe we can find something that fits what you need." He spent the next 20 minutes walking the man through the lot, showing him simple, reliable models instead of pushing him toward expensive ones. The owner watched from a distance, a small smile tugging at his lips. Later that afternoon, the old man returned, not to buy a car, but to say thank you. He said he'd never been treated with such patience before. The manager's eyes softened as he shook his hand. It was a small moment, but it meant a lot. The owner approached afterward. "That was good," he said quietly. "You listened to him." "That's where it starts," the manager nodded. "I'm learning," he said, and for once he meant it. In the following days, the owner started holding small meetings with different teams. He didn't talk about sales goals or performance charts. He talked about values and respect, teamwork, and humility. A dealership isn't just about cars, he told them. It's about trust. When people walk in here, they're not just buying a car. They're trusting you with their hard-earned money. They're trusting you to be honest. The words sank deep into everyone's hearts. Some of the older salesmen who had grown cynical over time found themselves nodding. Others sat quietly, realizing how far they had drifted from those simple truths. Even customers began to notice the change. Reviews started coming in online, small notes about how kind and respectful the staff were, how there was no pressure or judgment. Slowly, the dealership's reputation began to shift, but not everything was smooth. Change never is. One afternoon, a heated moment broke out in the service area. A young mechanic was frustrated after a mistake. He'd accidentally scratched a car during a repair. The service manager scolded him harshly in front of everyone, calling him careless. The young man's face turned red with embarrassment. The owner, who happened to be walking through at that moment, stopped. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Let's take a breath." Everyone went silent. He walked over, looked at the scratch, and then looked at the young mechanic. "You made a mistake," he said calmly. "We all do. The question is, what do we learn from it?" The young man nodded, eyes down. "I'll fix it," he whispered. The owner smiled softly. "Good, and next time slow down. Care isn't about being perfect. It's about not giving up." Then he turned to the service manager. "Correcting someone doesn't mean breaking them down. If we humiliate people for their mistakes, they'll stop caring. And when people stop caring, this whole place stops working." No one said a word. The lesson was clear. That moment spread through the dealership like a quiet ripple. People began treating each other differently, and not with fear, but with respect. The owner had shown them that strength didn't come from shouting or power. It came from patience. As the days passed, the manager began to see a version of the business he hadn't seen in years. Employees laughed more. Customers stayed longer. There was warmth in the air that had never been there before. And though he still carried guilt from that first encounter, he was slowly transforming it into something useful. Motivation to do better. One evening, after the showroom had closed, the manager walked outside to lock up. He found the owner standing by one of the cars, looking thoughtful. The golden light of sunset reflected off the windshield, giving everything a quiet glow. The manager approached carefully. "Long day," he said softly. The owner smiled faintly. "A good one, though." There was a pause before the manager spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you came that first day when I told you to leave, why didn't you just fire me after that?" The owner looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because I've been in your place before. I know what it feels like to make a mistake you can't take back. And I also know that real change doesn't come from punishment. It comes from understanding." The manager lowered his gaze. "I've been thinking about that moment every day since." "Good," the owner said quietly. "Keep thinking about it. Let it remind you to treat people better, not out of guilt, but out of growth." The manager nodded slowly. "I will, I promise." The owner smiled and looked toward the sunset. "You know," he said softly, "people see success as money or power. But to me, success is walking into a place and knowing you made it better, not just richer, but kinder." The manager thought about those words long after they parted ways that evening. Over the next few weeks, the dealership's transformation deepened. The owner began hosting short morning talks before opening hours. He shared stories from his past, how he'd started in the car business washing vehicles, how he'd faced disrespect and disbelief many times, and how he'd learned to let his work speak for him. The staff listened in silence. His stories weren't dramatic. They were real, grounded in everyday struggles. But that was what made them powerful. People saw a part of themselves in him. Even customers noticed the difference. One woman left a review online saying, "I don't know what changed in that dealership, but it feels like a completely new place. They treated me like family." Those words spread. Soon people who had never considered buying from that location began to visit. Sales started climbing, but this time no one was chasing numbers. They were chasing respect. The manager, who once only cared about profit margins, found himself caring more about how his team treated people. He encouraged them, supported them, even defended them when mistakes happened. He was slowly becoming the leader he had never been before. One day, the owner walked in and saw him laughing with the sales team. For a moment, he just stood there smiling. This was exactly what he had hoped for. Later that day, he called the manager into his office. "I wanted to say something," he said. "I've seen the effort you've put in. I've seen the way you've changed. I appreciate it." The manager looked genuinely touched. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You taught me more in these few weeks than I learned in all my years here." The owner nodded. "That's how growth works. It's not about what you know. It's about what you're willing to unlearn." The manager smiled. "I'll remember that." As the weeks turned into months, the dealership began to earn a reputation for something rare in the industry: kindness. Customers returned not just because of the cars, but because of the way they were treated. Staff turnover dropped. People took pride in where they worked. One day, corporate headquarters sent a letter recognizing the dealership as one of the top-performing branches in the region, not just for sales, but for customer satisfaction. The team celebrated together, cheering and clapping. The owner stood quietly at the back, smiling to himself. He wasn't the kind of man who needed praise. The real reward was watching people change, watching a place that once ran on ego now run on empathy. That evening, after everyone had gone home, he stood alone in the quiet showroom. The lights reflected off the cars just like the first day he walked in. But this time the feeling was different. He remembered that first encounter, being told to leave, feeling dismissed, unseen. Now, the same place that had once shut its doors on him had become a space of respect and growth. The manager came out of his office one last time, ready to leave for the night. He stopped beside the owner and said softly, "You turned this place around." The owner shook his head. "No," he said. "We did." They both stood there for a moment, looking at the showroom that now felt alive with meaning. As they turned off the lights and stepped outside, the sky above was deep blue, with a few stars beginning to show. The owner looked up, took a slow breath and said quietly, "It's amazing what can change when you decide to see people instead of judging them." The manager nodded. "I see that now. I'll never forget it." They locked the doors and the sound of the keys echoed softly in the night. Outside, the world felt peaceful. The road was quiet, the air cool. The dealership stood behind them, glowing faintly under the streetlights. Not just a building anymore, but a symbol of something much greater. A lesson about humility, change, and the power of treating people right. Months had passed since the new owner took charge, and the dealership had turned into something no one could have imagined before. Customers who once avoided the place now came in smiling. The staff worked together like a family, helping each other, sharing ideas, and treating everyone who walked in with warmth. The owner's quiet leadership had shaped the place into more than just a car business. It had become a story of second chances. But even good stories face new challenges, and this one was no different. One Friday morning, the manager stood in his office looking over a set of reports. Sales were steady, the staff was happy, and customers were satisfied. Everything seemed right. Yet he couldn't shake off a sense that something big was coming. The owner had been away for a few days, attending meetings at the corporate headquarters, and during his absence, the air in the dealership had shifted slightly. Not badly, but differently. Some of the employees, especially newer ones, didn't fully understand the journey that had brought the place this far. They hadn't seen the mistakes or lessons that shaped the team. They just saw success and thought it was easy to keep. That morning, a man in a dark suit walked through the glass doors. He looked polished, confident, and carried an expensive briefcase. The receptionist greeted him with a polite smile. "Good morning, sir. How can we help you today?" He gave her a quick nod. "I'm here to meet the manager." The manager stepped out, recognizing the man immediately. It was a regional representative from the corporate office, someone known for his tough standards. The last time he had visited before the ownership change, the dealership had been close to losing its contract. "Good to see you again," the manager said with a careful smile. The man didn't smile back. "I've heard things have changed here," he said, looking around with sharp eyes. "I came to see for myself," the manager gestured politely. "Of course. I'll show you around." As they walked through the showroom, the representative took notes. He watched the sales team, listened to how they greeted customers, and examined every detail. The staff stayed polite but tense, unsure of how to act under his heavy gaze. When they finished the tour, the man turned to the manager and said, "I'll be honest, it's better than I expected, but I'm not convinced yet. I want to see if this new way of doing things can actually hold up when things get tough." The manager nodded, hiding his worry. He knew what that meant. A test was coming, and it arrived sooner than he thought. The following week, the dealership received a large shipment of new cars, one of the biggest batches of the year. There was excitement in the air, but also pressure. If they handled this well, it would prove the new system worked. If they failed, the reputation they'd built could start to crack. The owner returned just as the new shipment arrived. He noticed the tension right away. "Everything all right?" he asked the manager. The manager nodded, though his voice sounded uncertain. "Corporate's watching us closely. They want to see if we can keep things running smoothly. The owner smiled calmly. Then we'll show them we can. Over the next few days, the dealership became a busy scene of movement and coordination. Cars were cleaned, displayed, and priced. The sales team worked late hours, trying to organize test drives and follow up with potential buyers. But with all the pressure, old habits began to slip back in. One morning, a young woman came into the dealership with her small child. She looked nervous, her clothes simple and worn. She asked about a used car, something affordable for her family. One of the newer salesmen, eager to meet his monthly target, barely gave her time to explain before saying, "You might not find what you're looking for here, ma'am. Our vehicles are a bit higher end." The words hit the air like a slap. The woman blinked, embarrassed, then thanked him quietly and turned to leave. But before she reached the door, the owner, who had been nearby, stepped forward. "Excuse me, miss," he said kindly. "Would you mind coming with me for a moment? I think I have something that might fit what you need." Her eyes widened slightly, unsure whether to trust him, but something in his calm tone made her stop. He led her to a smaller section of the lot where a few older cars were kept. Reliable, affordable, and perfect for someone starting over. He asked her about her budget, her daily routine, and what mattered most to her in a car. She explained she needed something safe and dependable for her child, but she couldn't afford much. The owner nodded thoughtfully and showed her a simple sedan in great condition. "This one has low mileage," he said. "It's not flashy, but it's reliable. I'll make sure we help you with the payment plan." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. "You'd really do that?" she asked softly. He smiled. "We're here to help people, not to turn them away." When she drove off the lot in her new car, she waved through the window, her child smiling beside her. The owner turned to the salesman who had dismissed her. "Do you know what just happened?" he asked gently. The salesman looked embarrassed. "I was wrong, sir. I judged her too quickly." The owner nodded. "That's how this business falls apart. Not because of prices or profits, but because of pride. Remember, every person who walks through that door deserves to be seen." The lesson spread fast. The team understood now that every small action mattered. But just as the dealership began to find its rhythm again, a bigger storm appeared. One of the suppliers made an error in the paperwork, causing a delay in several car registrations. Customers who had already paid were now waiting longer than expected to receive their vehicles. Some grew frustrated and started posting complaints online. Within days, social media was buzzing. "This dealership isn't what people say it is," one post read. "They don't deliver on time." The manager felt panic rising. He had worked so hard to rebuild the dealership's name, and now it was at risk again. He rushed to the owner's office. "We've got a problem," he said quickly. "If this gets worse, corporate will use it against us." The owner listened carefully, his face calm. "All right. Let's not hide from it. Let's be honest with our customers." That afternoon, the owner called a meeting with the staff. "We can't control everything," he said, "but we can control how we respond. When people are upset, they're not just angry about the delay, so they're angry because they feel ignored. Let's make sure no one feels ignored." They divided the customer list among the team. Each person called or met their clients face to face, explaining the situation honestly, apologizing sincerely, and offering free maintenance services to make up for the inconvenience. Some customers were still upset, but most were surprised by the honesty. One man even said, "I've dealt with many businesses, but no one's ever called me just to apologize." That means something. Within a week, the tide began to turn. The online reviews changed tone. People started posting about how the dealership had handled the issue with integrity. The negative buzz faded, replaced by respect. The corporate representative visited again after hearing about the incident. He expected chaos but found calm professionalism instead. The staff worked with confidence and customers looked satisfied. "I heard about the registration issue," he said to the manager. "I was ready to write a full report against you, but what I see here is impressive. You handled it better than most." The manager smiled modestly. "It wasn't just me. The team did what the owner taught us, and to be honest and to care." The representative looked thoughtful. "Maybe that's the secret," he said before leaving. That night, the dealership stayed open late for a special community event. The owner had arranged a customer appreciation evening, inviting people who had bought cars over the past year. There were snacks, music, and laughter. Families came with their children, taking photos beside their vehicles. As the night went on, the manager watched the crowd, realizing how far they had come. The place that once felt cold and rigid was now full of life. He walked over to the owner, who was talking to a group of customers, thanking them personally for their trust. When their eyes met, the owner smiled. "Quite a journey, isn't it?" he said quietly. The manager nodded. "I still can't believe how much has changed." The owner looked around the room. This is what it was always supposed to be, a place where people feel valued. As the evening ended, the manager stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The parking lot was filled with cars that shimmered under the streetlights. He could hear laughter drifting from inside the showroom. For the first time in a long while, he felt peace. The next morning, he arrived early. The sun was just rising, casting a warm glow across the lot. The owner was already there, standing near the entrance, sipping coffee. The manager joined him. "You never rest, do you?" He joked lightly. The owner chuckled. "Not when there's more to build." They stood in silence for a moment before the manager said, "You know, when you first walked in here, I thought you didn't belong. Now I can't imagine this place without you." The owner smiled faintly. "That's the beauty of life, and people surprise us, and sometimes we surprise ourselves." The manager nodded. "I've learned more from you than I can ever say. You didn't just change this dealership. You changed me." The owner looked at him kindly. "And that's why I stayed. Because change isn't about buildings or cars. It's about people who are willing to grow." As the day began, customers started arriving, and the staff moved with confidence and warmth. Every handshake, every smile, every small act of kindness carried the spirit of everything they had been through. The dealership wasn't just a business anymore. It was a reflection of what happens when people choose humility over pride, patience over anger, and understanding over judgment. The owner watched from a distance, a quiet satisfaction in his heart. He didn't need to remind anyone who he was or what he had been through. The results spoke for themselves, and though challenges would come again, he knew this team, this family, would face them differently now. Because they had learned something that would last longer than any car on the lot. That respect and kindness could rebuild even the most broken places. It had been almost a year since the new owner first walked into that dealership and was told to leave. Now the place stood as one of the most respected dealerships in the city, not because it sold the most expensive cars, but because people trusted it. Word had spread far and wide about how customers were treated there. People would say, "If you want to be treated right, go to that place." The change hadn't come from fancy ads or clever deals. It had come from how people felt when they walked through the doors. That morning, sunlight poured through the wide glass windows, washing the cars in gold. The showroom floor shined, the staff moved with calm confidence, and the sound of friendly chatter filled the air. The manager stood by the window, sipping coffee, watching the first customers of the day walk in. He had changed more than anyone could have predicted. He no longer judged by appearances, no longer spoke with the kind of pride that once clouded his judgment. He listened more. He cared more. The owner arrived a little later than usual, dressed as simply as he always did. No suit, no flash, just quiet authority. The staff greeted him warmly as he walked through the door. "Morning," he said with his usual calm smile. The manager joined him as they walked across the floor. "Morning, sir. You picked a good day to come in. We've got 3 deliveries lined up and a big client coming this afternoon." The owner nodded. "Sounds good. Let's make sure everything goes smoothly." The day moved with its usual rhythm. Customers came, deals were made, and laughter echoed through the halls. But beneath the calm surface, something was quietly building. Around noon, the owner called the manager to his office. "I have something to share with you," he said. The manager sat down, trying to read the owner's tone. "Everything all right?" The owner smiled faintly. "More than all right. I've been thinking about the future, of this place, of all of you. And I've decided it's time for a new chapter." The manager frowned slightly, unsure what he meant. "A new chapter?" "Yes," the owner said. "When I bought this dealership, I wanted to prove something. Not to anyone else, but to myself. I wanted to see if a place built on fairness and respect could truly thrive. And now it's clear that it can." The manager's heart tightened a little. "Are you saying you're leaving?" The owner didn't answer right away. He looked around his office at the framed photos of the team, the certificates on the wall, and the small model car sitting on his desk. "I won't say I'm leaving," he said quietly. "I'll say I'm passing it on. I believe every leader's job is to build something that can stand without them." The room fell silent for a moment. The manager didn't know what to say. "You built this place from the ground up," he said finally. "We wouldn't be here without you." The owner smiled gently. "Maybe, but now it's time to see if it can grow even more without me standing over it." The manager leaned forward. "Who will take your place?" The owner's eyes softened. "You will." The words hung in the air, heavy but full of meaning. The manager froze, his mind racing. "Me?" he asked in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," the owner said. "You've earned it. You didn't just become a better manager. You became a better person, and that's what leadership is about." The manager felt a lump rise in his throat. He looked down, trying to hide the emotion in his eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep this place alive the right way," the owner replied softly. "That's all I ask." The manager nodded slowly, still overwhelmed. "I'll do everything I can." The owner stood and extended his hand. "That's all I need to hear." They shook hands, and though it looked simple, the moment carried the weight of everything they had been through. The mistakes, the lessons, the growth. Later that afternoon, the entire staff was gathered in the main hall. The owner stood before them, calm and composed as always. "I wanted to speak to all of you," he began. "When I first came here, this place was very different. People were afraid to speak up. Customers were treated like numbers. There was talent, but not much trust. I saw potential, but more importantly, I saw good people who just needed a reason to believe again." The team listened in silence, their faces showing pride and emotion. He continued, "Together we turned this dealership into something special. Not because of sales or awards, but because we built it on respect. Every person here played a part in that, and that's why today I can step back knowing it's in good hands." Whispers spread through the crowd. Some people looked surprised. Others looked sad. The owner smiled faintly. "I'll be handing the role of general manager to someone who's earned it through hard work, honesty, and humility. Someone who knows what it means to learn from mistakes and lead by example." He turned toward the manager. "Congratulations," he said. The staff broke into applause. The manager's eyes glistened as he stood up, shaking the owner's hand. "Thank you," he said softly. The owner nodded. "Thank yourself. You grew into this." The applause grew louder, and for the first time in his life, the manager didn't feel pride in being above others. He felt pride in being part of something real. That evening, after the announcement, the owner stayed behind in his office. The dealership was quiet now. The lights dimmed, the hum of the city faint outside the windows. He looked around, taking it all in, and the desks, the walls, the cars, the people's laughter that still seemed to echo faintly in the halls. He picked up a photo from his desk, a team picture taken months earlier during one of their community events. Everyone was smiling, arms around each other, the manager right in the middle. He smiled too. Then he placed the photo back and walked out of the office. Outside, the evening sky was soft and golden. The cars on the lot gleamed under the setting sun. The manager came out a few minutes later, still looking a little dazed from the day's events. "You really meant it," he said quietly as he joined the owner by the doorway. "I did," the owner replied. "You've earned it." The manager hesitated, then asked, "What will you do now?" The owner looked out at the street. "There are other places that need help. Other people who've been overlooked. Maybe I'll find another dealership, or maybe I'll do something completely different. But whatever it is, I'll keep building." The manager nodded. "You'll always have a place here," the owner smiled. "I know." They stood in silence for a while, watching the last customers drive away. The air smelled faintly of rain, and a light breeze rustled the flags above the lot. Finally, the owner said, "You know, when I first came here, I wasn't sure what I'd find. I thought maybe I was making a mistake. But then I saw how much people could change if someone believed in them." The manager looked down, his voice quiet. "You changed me more than anyone ever has." The owner placed a hand on his shoulder. "You changed yourself. I just gave you a chance." The next morning, the news had spread. People from the community stopped by to congratulate the manager, thanking T.